Hey, folks, I'm Rob Breakenridge. Thanks so much for joining us here. Alberta, Canada find themselves at a bit of a crossroads here when it comes to some important decisions to be made about big projects, major projects, as the federal government refers to them, and specifically energy projects. Now, there's a little bit of uncertainty at the moment regarding the Alberta Canada MOU, this memorandum of understanding, which, of course, is also linked to some trade offs on the other side, including notably the idea of major carbon capture. Well, given everything we're dealing with at the moment, our next guest says it's time for some urgency, maybe time for a bit of a rethink in our approach in all of this. Martha Hall Findlay holds the Palmer Chair in Public Policy and is director of the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, policyschool.ca. Martha Hall Findlay, great to have you with us here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So first of all, a sense of kind of the moment we're at, or almost like the magnitude of the moment. It was interesting this week as we talk about all of this. You get the executive director of the International Energy Agency telling Canada, urging Canada to accelerate energy infrastructure. You know, given everything happening globally at the moment, what's your assessment, first of all, of where we're at here?
Well, in and of itself, that change of tune is indicative of just how much the world has changed. The IEA has not necessarily been saying that over the years, but we know this too because so many other of our allies, other countries, have been saying we want Canada's energy. We know you have it. You know you have the resources, and we're very worried about energy security now. We're very worried, of course, about energy affordability, accessibility. So we know the world has changed dramatically. I mean, frankly, it changed dramatically with the 22nd invasion by Russia of Ukraine. The first being, of course, 2014. But the 2022 one was pretty stark as a reminder about geopolitics and energy. Of course, now with Donald Trump, the war in Iran, it's just exploded into we have to do a really big rethink about energy security and, frankly, Canada's role in it. And so, yes, we have to really think seriously about how can we best maximize certainly the opportunity for Canada, but also play our part in terms of meeting the requests from so many of these allies saying we want your energy, but we're still not getting it to those markets.
Right. So, I mean, it's geopolitical in that sense, but I think from Canada's perspective too, as we face all kinds of economic headwinds and trade uncertainty, there's that economic urgency here at home to take advantage of our strengths, especially given everything we're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. And in my view, look, we're in Alberta. It's been pretty easy to blame the last 10 years on some of our economic challenges. My view is that we've had a full quarter century of missed opportunity. There are a whole lot of reasons for that, but we really have not built the trade infrastructure. And that's all infrastructure. That's linear, that's rail, road, pipelines, of course, but it's ports, it's all of the above. And we really have become complacent. I find it very hard to say thanks to Donald Trump all in the same phrase, but
Right.
he has provided an important wake-up call to Canadians and to the country. Our economy has been lagging. Our productivity numbers are terrible. The whole economy has been lagging for a long time. It's not because of Donald Trump. He, however, has, of course, with the tariffs and some of the other odd activities, has really made us realize, no, we have to actually pick up our game. We are also heavily blessed with natural resources. It's not just oil and gas. It is that, of course, big time, but forest products, minerals, food. This is an important time for Canada, and if we don't take advantage of it, then shame on us.
So we are at a bit of a tipping point here, right? So it's been over a year since Trump came into office with the tariffs and all of this trade uncertainty. Of course, it's been a year since the last federal election and a new prime minister talking about a different approach, a bolder approach, perhaps. Here we are a year later, and I think a lot of Canadians are waiting to see the follow through, waiting to see what that's going to look like in practice. So we're sort of at this point now where we need to see action. We need governments to start to deliver on this rhetoric.
Absolutely. And look, I hugely supportive of what the federal government says that it's trying to do. And we do see that in some areas, right? Don't forget, there's a whole lot of different things going on for the government. I was a huge fan of the MOU between the federal government and the province of Alberta when it was announced. This kind of thing is historic. We've never, in all of Canadian history, big projects, whether it was, the railways, the two railways, the St. Lawrence Seaway, highways, Trans-Canada Highway, none of these have actually happened without significant federal and provincial collaboration and without significant public and private financial collaboration. And so the MOU was incredibly welcome, right? This is really important. This is a time for Canada to really build that kind of infrastructure, and in this case, particularly a pipeline to the West Coast, so that we can diversify our markets. I mean, we are heavily dependent on the United States in terms of an export market for us. So this would be huge for the whole country, frankly. This is not just an Alberta thing. The energy exports that we do as a country benefit the whole country. The challenge that we've seen is that it's taking a little while, right? And one of the things that hit home for me over the last, frankly, a couple months. So I was very involved in the Pathways project, the big Pathways carbon capture use and storage, right from its inception in 2020, right? And it was a really important aspect of getting things built in Canada. It was a time when, Canada had announced its intention to follow the Paris Agreement, the targets that we had made. Other countries around the world were saying the same thing, right? There was a very big momentum to really take big, projects and do really big differences in our emissions. And of course, the oil sands are very big emitters in the grand scheme of things in terms of Canada. So it was an important project. But over the last couple months, I have to say, I've been hearing and listening and thinking a lot more about, but the world has changed since then. It's changed an awful lot. And with the announcements from the government of such increased spending, right, we know we need to spend billions of dollars on national security, on national defense, on infrastructure. Am I pleased to hear the government talking like that? Absolutely, because it's been a long time coming. The problem is that it doesn't come from nowhere, right? These are billions of dollars. And so going back and looking at the cost of Pathways would be a collective many, many billions, like I think a minimum of 22 billion price tag for the first phase of Pathways, which is with the companies, the Alberta government, and the federal government, everybody collectively committed to spending billions of dollars for the CCUS project. But if we're saying we also need billions of dollars to spend on these other things that are priorities for Canada, it felt to me like we needed a rethink. So you rethink, well, okay, well, what are we getting? What would we be getting for those billions of dollars for Pathways? Well, Canada is one of the only countries now that is still, frankly, paying attention to emissions targets and the Paris Accord, right? Most other countries around the world are saying, we can't focus on that right now. We have really immediate energy security challenges. We need, and listen, even the IEA is saying completely different things about the changed priorities. And so if you do the analysis, the carbon capture and storage project of Pathways would have some effect on Canadian emissions, but climate is a global challenge. And that Pathways project for mid-20 billions of dollars would actually reduce global emissions by 0.02%. So in a world where the focus and the priorities have changed dramatically, to me, it just doesn't make sense that Canada spend billions of dollars on something that really would have virtually no effect on global emissions. People will say, yeah, but Canadian emissions, we need to meet our targets. I mean, you know what? Canada has to stop thinking. It's almost like a false arrogance. We're just not that big. We don't have that in the grand scheme of things. Why, when we have all these other priorities, would we continue to feel that it's important to spend billions and billions of dollars on something that will actually have no effect on the real problem at hand, which is global emissions.
So if that project is delinked from the MOU, or if it is postponed or put off, what impact would that have? I think there are those who feel that it needs to be linked to something like this if it is to move ahead. But do you believe that it can be postponed or delayed?
I would hope that it can be postponed. And it is, I've tried to be clear. I'm not saying cancel it. I'm
Right.
saying postpone, because I really do believe that we need to play a part in terms of global climate change. Even if Canada's part is still, significantly insignificant, if you will. But we want to feel as though we're doing our part. I get that. But from an MOU perspective and the ability to get a pipeline built to the West Coast, there are people who have said to me, it is linked, and it's linked because we, the collective, we need the social license that the Pathways project would give in order to be able to build a pipeline. Well, I have a couple of answers to that. We don't feel the need to have social license with respect to any of the other projects from any of the other industries, okay? And they're, big industries in Canada that are big emitters, right? But we're going ahead. We're doing, everything we can. So to me, that felt a little bit tied to an anti-oil sentiment that frankly just I don't think exists anymore. It might exist among a small number of people, but again, we now have countries, calling and saying we really need to have Canada as a reliable source of energy. And so my answer to that about social license is, but if it's not actually going to make any difference to global emissions, if the purpose really is Canada's targets, but Canada, which targets, by the way, everybody knew were completely unrealistic when they were made anyway. And in a world where virtually no other country is actually paying attention to their Paris Accord commitments, why on earth should Canada actually be the one to do it? And so rather than say, we need to address the social license by spending billions of dollars, it feels like you're buying the privilege. Yeah. To me, the right answer is let's have a conversation with those people who feel we need that kind of social license, which term I don't like at the best of times, and really have a conversation about, but why do they feel that way? Why do they feel that that's Canada's role right now in a world that has significantly changed from when this was first discussed?
Right. Well, I think putting this project on hold for now takes away some of that uncertainty around the MOU, and of course, as you mentioned, this big price tag that might be discouraging things to some extent. Does it complicate some of the politics of all of this? Does it make governments' job more difficult? What do you see as the impact of maybe removing this potential obstacle?
Without question, it affects the politics. I think that's the biggest single stumbling block. So if I said we shouldn't be buying social license when it really won't make any difference, we should be having a conversation about why do people still think we need to have that social license and on what basis? If it's to calm the waters with people who have been anti-oil and gas, they're, we need to do everything to reduce our emissions, no matter if they don't have a really significant effect on global emissions, then I think we need to go back to those people and say, but you know what, the world's changed and Canada's priorities have changed. And so we shouldn't actually be tying something that is not in fact going to have an effect on the underlying problem that they're concerned about, which is global climate change, not Canada, because it's not a country, it doesn't respect borders, it's global. It's just, we need to have a straightforward, much more honest conversation among Canadians about, well, what are our priorities right now? And understand we can't afford all of them. So we need to make some hard decisions. And it wasn't easy for me to come out with this recommendation simply because of having spent so much time and effort getting Pathways done and off the ground. But I really do think, I put on my Canada hat. This is just not the time. We have other priorities. And I would say building the pipe and increasing energy production is very much one of those significant priorities now.
Yeah, it should be. It's interesting. Amid all of this, now there's renewed talk of closer ties with the U.S. on the energy front. This
Hmm.
Bridger pipeline that would look a lot like Keystone XL in many ways, I
Yeah.
suppose, seems to be moving forward. And I do wonder how this all ties together. Is it possible that we could at the same time diversify our markets while increasing our connectivity to the United States, or is this going to be seen maybe as an easier project moving forward? What do you see as the impact of that?
Well, without question, many people see it as easier, right? Easier, faster.
Mm,
And exporting oil is a good thing for Canada. Being too dependent on the United States, not so great, however. But my view, and you'll have challenges if we were able to say we're doing both at the same time, there are challenges associated with that. It's hard to get the construction people. Like you, it's hard to actually build big projects at the same time. But if we could, um, my preference would be all of the above.
mhm.
I do not see engagement or even greater engagement with the United States as precluding
Right.
significant expansion of our markets, particularly to Asia. Um, I would prefer the latter because I really do think it's revenue generating, significantly good for the country. We saw the Trans Mountain expansion alone when it came on stream. It contributed like a point and a half to our GDP. I mean,
Right.
those are big numbers. This is really important for Canada. If we could do both, I'd be thrilled. If we had to choose one, I'd rather choose West Coast because I think the Asian markets are much more important for a whole variety of reasons. But my goodness, we have so much energy that the Americans and the rest of the world want. If we can really get our heads together to start uh, producing more and exporting more, then I think it would be the best of all worlds.
Well, we're coming up on some further deadlines for the MOU, and I guess being able to submit a project to the major projects office would be the next step. We understand June, so that's right around the corner here. What then should we be watching for in the weeks ahead? Do you think?
I would love to see the federal government in particular take this as an indication of maybe some of those so-called social license requirements, maybe some of the drivers that they had for pathways being a critical component of the MOU. I'd like to see some real thinking around that and the ability to say, look, the MOU is I think the MOU was terrific, as I said, a historic thing and critical in terms of federal, provincial, and public-private collaboration. So what I've just said is I'd love to see it reframed. I'd like to see it reframed as the focus is on the building of the pipeline for all the reasons that we've discussed, right? Canada's priorities now. Postpone the pathways because we could put those 22 plus billions of dollars to much better use right now. And use that sort of change discussion to reframe it in a way that can actually help have us all move forward.
We'll see where it all goes from here. Much more is mentioned, policyschool.ca. Martha Hall Findlay, appreciate your insight on all of this, and thank you so much for making some time for us here.
No, thanks very much for having me, Rob.
And our thanks once again to Martha Hall Findlay, Director of the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, also former elected member of Parliament, former Chief Sustainability Officer at Suncor. So as noted, she's been at the forefront of these conversations in recent years, and I think it is significant that as a previous proponent of carbon capture, she's saying now is the time to hit the pause button on that, make sure that the priority is building major projects, given the moment Canada faces, and that would certainly include a new pipeline to the West Coast. So for now, the Memorandum of Understanding is linked to the Pathways project, carbon capture. We'll see if there's any appetite for rethinking all of that. But I think it's a significant moment to hear Martha Hall Findlay come out and make that case. So we'll see what kind of weight that carries. Now, in the meantime, as for the MOU itself, the Globe and Mail reporting on Wednesday that one of the sticking points at the moment seems to be the industrial carbon pricing side. That was the other policy trade-off, that there would be an agreement between Alberta and Ottawa moving forward on a higher level of an industrial carbon price. So that the target is still agreed upon. It's just, it seems now the question of how quickly do we get to that level. So that's where there's maybe some back and forth still going on. The other side of things, and the Prime Minister did suggest that he would be meeting with Alberta's Premier later this week in Ottawa, although Rick Bell and Post Media reporting on Wednesday that from the Premier's side of things, they're not aware that that meeting has been confirmed. Apparently, Danielle Smith is going to be in Ottawa at the end of the week, but it's unclear whether indeed there will be a meeting with the Prime Minister. Now, on Tuesday at the news conference unveiling Louise Arbour as the next Governor General, the Prime Minister was asked not directly about the MOU, but what's happening in Alberta around a possible referendum, although he does kind of indirectly refer to the MOU in his response as he talks about his efforts to try to make progress in these areas and demonstrate to Albertans and other Canadians that we can accomplish big things still.
What will you do to stop that referendum from winning?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is there's, again, keeping with the discussion today, there's the rule of law, there's the Clarity Act, which has been opined upon by the Supreme Court, not at the same time when Madame Arbour was sitting on the Supreme Court, but has been the judgment passed there, and any referenda in any part of Canada need to be consistent with that. As you know as well, there's a judicial challenge separately but relatedly by Indigenous nations in Alberta regarding the question. So those processes have to be followed through. But if you bring it into, so I'm observing that because of the solemnity of the moment that we're observing today and celebrating today. But if you bring it into my day-to-day responsibilities and those of the government, it's to continue to act as we have from the start, which is in the spirit of cooperative federalism, making the country work, making it work for Albertans, making it work for Indigenous peoples, making it work for all Canadians. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the Prime Minister speaking on Tuesday morning. Again, I guess we'll see if there is indeed a meeting with Danielle Smith later this week in the nation's capital. We'll see if there's some kind of agreement that can be reached on carbon pricing, because we are coming up to some other deadlines around this memorandum of understanding. So we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Again, you can find us on YouTube at Rob Breakenridge Show, on podcast platforms as well, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and the rest, much more at our website as well, robbreakenridge.ca. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Hey, folks, thanks for watching and listening. You can find us at robbreakenridge.ca. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button below and stay connected with The Rob Breakenridge Show.